Hello and welcome to the next video in the Wized beginner series. We are working our way through CRUD with Airtable, how to create, read, update and delete records. In the previous video, we learned how to read a single record from Airtable. In this video, we are going to learn how to update a single item. Let's dive right into it. I'm going to keep this simple. I want to add an input field here that will show a comment, just an admin comment. Hey, I like this story. Hey, I need to delete this story. Just a way to have a field that we can update using Wized. Now, generally, the vast majority of the time, you would have user authentication set up here, and you would have some sort of permissions where users can only edit the comment on their own story, or users can only edit a comment if they're an admin user. We're going to get around to that, but for now, I want to show people how to do this. There will be people that have set up authentication already and want to get updating records working. So for now, we'll just look at updating. Anyone can change the comment, and later on, we will set up our authentication. So we left off last time with our view story page working. I am going to add this updatability on this page. Over in Webflow, I am going to go to view story. And what's my layout here? I have a wrapper for each of these. So I'm going to duplicate that one and change this to comment. Now the rest of these, I believe I'm bolding, yes. Comment, I don't want to change. It's not going to have a Wized attribute because, as we'll see in a moment, there's going to be an input underneath here. So for comment, I'm just going to style it as paragraph. Not even paragraph, just text weight bold, like so. Then I'm just going to grab an input field. And of course, text field can only be placed in a form. Two options here. One is you put in a form. The other is you can just use a HTML embed or a custom element in Webflow to get that in here. Benefits of using a form is it comes with form validation and the form elements that we may want to put some settings on. And we do want to have a submit button or a save button rather. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a form block in there. And I'm just going to delete the email text field and label. I'm going to delete this label, but keep the text input. And I'm going to give this, well, again, there's two ways we can do this. We can just put an attribute on the input, or we can put an attribute on the form. I want to go with the form because then it gives us access to that on submit event. I'm just going to call this comment for the text fields. For the form, I'm going to call it story comment form. And again, in Webflow, we don't want to put the attribute on this form block. That's kind of the overall wrapper. This next one down, form, is where we want to put the attribute. I'm going to call this Wized and call that story card comment form, like so. Then we don't need to put an attribute on the input or on the button. Button I'm going to change to save comment. Okay. Waiting we won't be using because we're going to disable the default form behavior, which is submitting to Webflow, because we want to submit this to Airtable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this entire spinner wrapper and I'm going to paste it inside the form. I want to put it above the button and I'm going to say saving comment. And I want to add a bit of space here. So I'm just going to grab this small spacer, pull it down between text field and the spinner. And I also want to put it between the text, the spinner and the save button. So then this, I just need to change from get story spinner to story comment spinner. Okay. Now I need a success message. I want to tell the user when the comment has been saved so that they know they can navigate away from the page. If we go to AI story generator, we don't have a success message here because this just displays the story if it works fine. I think there's nothing hidden in here. No. And again, we don't want to use the form success message because we're not going to actually submit the form. So go back over to view story, and I am just going to throw a paragraph in here, and we'll call this, or we'll just put in comment request status, and we'll use Wized to change this to green with the success text if it's successful, red if not. And we just give this an attribute, story comment status text. Okay, so we have our comment input inside of a form. We have our text for the request status, which I want to start off with cloak. We have our spinner, and we have our save comment button. That should be good for now. Let's go ahead and publish that staging. Next, we'll go over to Airtable. We need a new field for the comment. I'm going to go for single line text. Comment is going to be short. I'll call this comment and create that field. So over in Wized, I'm going to navigate to my story vault, and I'm going to select one of these stories. Okay. This saving comment is still there, even though I thought I put Wiz cloak on it. I put that on the comment request status, but not on here. Because we copied it from up above, and that one we want to display straight away because the request starts straight away. So just publish that. While that's publishing, we need a new request. So I'm going to add a new request, and I'm going to call it update story comment. That is going to go into story crud. App is going to be Airtable. Method is going to be update item. New method in use here. Base, as always, Wized grok story generator. Table is stories. Now we need to pass in the record ID. So if you watched the last lesson, you will know that when we are on the story vault, we have put a URL parameter on all of these buttons. Very quick recap. On all of these buttons, we are getting the ID of that item. It's Airtable ID, and we are setting it to a parameter called story ID. When we click through, we go to our view story page, and we set the story ID to the Airtable ID. The request get the story is set to trigger whenever the story ID parameter is there. That request uses the story ID parameter to get the record from Airtable and displays it here. So over in our request, all we need to do is go into record ID and return n.parameter.story ID. Done. Super simple. Love it. There's our ID. Okay. Fields. The only field we want to update is comments. So if we go into comments and into our data store, we should see a new form, story comment form. And we want to return the value of the comment. My God, this is easy. I hope you guys are finding it just as easy. So let's just recap because that was real quick. We created a new request using the Airtable app, which we've set up already. The method is update item. We select our base, our table. Passing in the record ID is super simple because we already set up most of that for getting the record. getting the record and editing the record are very similar. When we get the record, we pass in the ID and we select which columns we want to have the data returned from in our request response. For updating the column, same thing, except we are passing in new information to the record in Airtable. So this is going to pass in the value of that input in the form. Now, to get the next step working, we are going to, we need to get this to submit, this request to submit when the form is submitted. And we also need to set up the spinner and the success message. Let's do the spinner first. So we can go in here and find story comment spinner. Once again, we've done this a couple of times now. Render if return r dot update story comment dot is requesting. Easy peasy. R is for request. Update story comment is the name of our request. Is requesting will be true whenever the request is requesting. Nice and simple. Okay. For our status text, let's jump into this one. So render if. I want this to render if update story comment has requested, so it has ran, and r dot update story comment dot is requesting is not true. So if you think about this, the first time we run this, this will not display. Once the request finishes, the text will display, and we're going to change the text depending on if it was a success or a failure. Then we don't want this to show if the user saves the comment again. We want it to disappear while it's in action, like so. Okay, so that's visibility. For the text, I want to set two different values here. The first is if r dot update story comment dot okay. If the request was a success, we want to say, we want to return story comment updated successfully. This is a Boolean. It can only be true or false. So there's two ways we can do this that are pretty much the same. We could say else if r dot update story comment dot okay. The inverse of that, if it's not okay, by putting the exclamation mark in front of that. But because there's only two options, the other thing we can do to keep this simple is we can just say else, because that is the only other option. And then we want to say, or we want to return, get the lingo right. Then what we would do here is we would concatenate the error. Because I haven't run this. Oh, we can actually go with status text should return the issue. Okay. Then the other thing I want to do is I want to change the inline style. I want it to be green if it's successful, red if it's unsuccessful. Now, usually we do this with classes. You'd have a class for success text, for error text. I'm going to be lazy. And I just want to say style color. Then for the value, we can once again do our if-else logic in here. And again, us developers and low-code developers don't like doing work more than once. So I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to paste it in here. Except we're going to change this, if it's okay, to green. And we're going to change this, if it's not okay, to red. Nice and simple. Okay. That's our spinner. That's our status text. Now we need to submit this. So we are going to go into our story card comment form. And we're going to go over to element events and click add event. The event we want is submit, which is specific to forms. We want to prevent default. The default behavior that we want to prevent is actually submitting this to Webflow and having it appear as a form submission. Do we want to reset the form? No, we don't want to reset the form. Conditional we don't want to turn on. What we can just do is go back to Webflow briefly and go into our comment input and change it to required. That takes advantage of Webflow's built-in form validation so that we don't have to go doing a conditional here that says if, there's content in here, return true. If not, return false. We can just do that over here with required and publish that. Okay. Back over to Wized. What we want to do is very simple. The action is perform request, and the request is update story comment. Now, the other thing we'll, of course, want to do that we'll do afterwards is when the user submits a comment and refreshes or comes back to the story, we need to pull that value from Airtable and display it there so we can actually see what the last comment is. We'll come back to that. We'll refresh the canvas to get our update, our required update. I'll type in, this is a test comment. Nice smiley face. So what should happen? We should see our spinner appear. We should get our success text from the Airtable request happening. And then for this once upon story, we should see the comment appear. And what can also be handy is open up the log while you're doing this to see what's happening. I'm going to clear that and I'm going to save comment. And I wasn't actually, my eyeballs were not on this area. I was looking at the log, so I didn't actually see if the spinner was there. The spinner is there, and this does disappear while it is running. Okay. Now, based on that, it should be over in Airtable. Yes, there it is. There we go. Isn't that easy? Again, I hope I'm making it easy and that this is all easy to follow along with. Okay. Now, the only issue left, if we refresh the page, our comment is not there. There are two ways we can set the value of this input field. The first is we put an attribute on it, just like we did with all of these text items. We're going to take a different approach that doesn't require adding an attribute here. Because again, if we had quite a long form, there's already no need to do that for submitting the form because we can just put an attribute on the form itself and then all of the inputs will be picked up automatically. We have a way to do this that we haven't come across yet. This is going to be new. If we go into the story comment form, we have a unique section down here called form values in the element settings. This allows us to set the values of the forms with a single input. If we hover over the tooltip here, it says the values to set on the form. The function must return an object where the keys are the names of the form fields and the values are the values to set. Bit complicated or difficult to understand if you're not used to JavaScript. Let's break it down. The function must return an object. So you've already worked with these. When we go into an input and we set the value, this is the function inside the function editor, and we're returning some text and some info. So this needs to return an object. We go back into the form and go down to form values. The function must return an object where the keys are the name of the form fields and the values are the values to set. Okay, let's break that down again. We'll go in here. We want to return an object. Objects have key value pairs. We looked at these before in a previous lesson, but this would look something like model, Ford, color, red. And if we format this up here, it should format it all nicely. It actually, I made a mistake there. I had comments on there where I didn't need them. So this is what it's going to do. It's going to return an object. Model is a key. Color is a key. Ford is a value. Red is a value. Okay. So it says that the keys are the name of the form fields. We can see what that is by going in here into our data editor. The form field is called comments. And you'll see it's added model and color in here because it's trying to set those. They don't exist. It's actually creating them in there. Anyways, comment is the field name. So what all that complicated text meant was we need to return an object where we have key value pairs that match the form fields. That means we need to say comment for the name of the field. And then all we need to do is the value. We will open up the data editor, into requests, into get single story, data, fields, comment. If we had another field in here that we wanted to populate, we would add that in here as well. We only have one at the minute, so we can see that this is going to return comment. This is a test. If we close out of this, we will see it appear here. So this is a single function that allows us to set all of the inputs in our form at once. Then we also have merged values. This basically means that if we don't check it and there's existing inputs in the form and we pass in this array, any inputs that we haven't specified are going to be removed. It's not going to merge updated data with the existing data. If we check it, it says the existing values will be kept and only the values set in the function will be updated. So if you have, two inputs, one of them is empty, one of them has content, you want to update the empty one, but keep the one that has content as it is, you would check that input. We'll take a further look at that at another lesson. Now, to test that this is working, what we want to do is change this comment. This is an updated test comment. Save it, refresh, and we should see our updated test comment. Just to be 100% sure, let's go back to our story vaults into Once Upon a Time. And there it is, right away. That's it, folks. That is how you update a value in a record inside of Airtable. Now again, don't do this unless you want anyone in the world to be able to find your site and change it. There are use cases where you'd want to do that. If I wanted to have a list of comments here and anyone in the world could add a comment, that'd probably work a little differently. I might have another table that is, another table that is a list of comments and then make a relationship. There may be some use cases where you do want to do this, just make sure that that is the case. Very briefly, what we did as a recap, we added in a form inside of Webflow and we have an input with a label above it. We have our comment request status text that we're going to update with the success message or the error message. We have our spinner for saving comment, and we have a button for saving comment. We don't have an attribute on the input, only on the form. Over in Wized, we first of all went into elements and we set the story comment spinner to only be visible when our update story comment request is requesting. And we set the status to either say it was a success if the request is okay, or an error with the error text if it's not okay. We also then did the exact same logic, but for the color, so that we can change it to green for success, red for an error. We then created our new request in Airtable called update story comment. We selected the base and the table, and then we did the exact same thing that we did for getting the story. We just pull that ID out of our parameter that we are setting up here in our previous lesson, depending on which story is clicked from the vault. Then the only thing we're updating is this comment field, where we're passing in the value of the comment field on our form. Then on the form, we have two things. The first is an event. When the form is submitted, we want to prevent the default behavior of submitting to Webflow. We want to run the request update story comments. And lastly, also on the form, on the settings, we are setting the form value of comment so that when we refresh the page, the comment is there. That's all. Nice and straightforward. So up next, we are going to look at deleting an item. The final letter in CRUD, D, how to delete a story from our story vault. That's up next. Again, if you are enjoying this series, give us a like and a subscribe to please the YouTube gods. Leave a comment with any feedback, positive or negative, on the video, as well as other videos that you'd like to see in the future. Catch you on the next video.